The shot cracked the morning wide open like somebody took a hammer to glass, and the whole street forgot how to breathe. I was at the sink with the window cracked, warm air drifting in, a basket of clean towels at my hip, the kind of ordinary moment that becomes unbearable when you replay it later, knowing what came next. The coffee maker was gurgling its last drops. The radio was playing something soft and forgettable. And then that sound arrived, hard and mean, and every nerve I've got stood up at once. I didn't think. There was no thought, just motion. I ran down the porch steps, across the little patch of lawn we'd edged with daffodils because my kid loves anything that leans toward the sun. My bare feet hit the concrete path, and somewhere in the back of my mind I registered the heat already rising from the pavement. The way spring mornings in our neighborhood smell like cut grass and sprinkler water. None of that mattered. Nothing mattered except getting to her, and there she was. My girl, face down near the curb, her pink hoodie already blossoming red like some terrible flower opening in fast motion. Her wheelchair was tipped over on its side, the wheel still spinning like the world hadn't gotten the memo that everything had just ended. One of her hands was stretched out toward the sidewalk, fingers still dusted with chalk. The tin we keep in an old cookie box had busted open, and colors were everywhere. A smear of orange right where she'd been drawing a flower, yellow streaking across the concrete, blue, scattered like confetti at a party nobody wanted to attend. I didn't see her. That's what the woman said. The one standing in the middle of her perfect yard like she was posing for a brochure, like she was waiting for someone to take her picture. Both hands dangling at her sides, and a pistol hanging from one of them like it weighed nothing at all, like it was just another garden tool she'd picked up on her way to trim the roses. I didn't even see her, she repeated, and her voice had this quality to it, almost bored. Like she was talking about a trash bin left too close to the curb or a package delivered to the wrong address. There was no panic in it, no horror, just this flat, administrative tone, like she was filing a report about a minor inconvenience. I remember the way my knees hit the concrete, how the scrape came later, not then, because in that moment, all I could see was my daughter's hair spread across the sidewalk like dark silk, the little ponytail holder she'd been so proud of that morning, the messy bun she'd insisted on doing herself, the chalk tin we keep in an old cookie box, the one decorated with stickers she'd collected over 2 years, busted open, colors everywhere, a smear of orange right where she'd been drawing a flower, the petals half finished, reaching toward the sun she'd sketched in the corner. I pressed both hands to her back, and they came away warm and wet. There was a hole, ragged and obscene, just below her shoulder blade, a hole that shouldn't exist in a 9-year-old's body, a hole that had no business being there on a Tuesday morning in a neighborhood where the biggest controversy had been about mailbox colors. And I told her, over and over, my voice breaking on every word, "Baby, I'm here. You're okay. Stay with me. Breathe with me. 1, 2, 3. You know the count." We'd done breathing exercises in therapy for months, counting together, finding rhythm when her body wouldn't cooperate. Now I was using that same count to keep her alive, to keep both of us tethered to something that made sense. Somewhere far away, a siren finally woke up. The sound seemed to take forever to get closer, like it was wading through honey. And I looked up at the woman with the gun, and I heard my voice come out raw and cracked from someplace deep, someplace I didn't know I had. "What did you do? What did you do to my kid?" She blinked, slow and deliberate, like I'd interrupted her in the middle of an important thought. She lifted her chin half an inch, and the morning sun caught on the pearls at her throat, and she said, in that same flat voice, "This is Willow Ridge. We have rules." I was defending my property, all in one stilted breath, as if the words might shield her better than any fence ever could. Her name is Mara Kent, president of the Willow Ridge Homeowners Association. Pearls and pastel cardigans and that smile that never touches her eyes. The kind of smile that's really just teeth arranged in a specific pattern. The kind of woman who brings rhubarb pie and violation notices in the same visit, who waves at you from her driveway while filing complaints about your headshite. We'd moved to Willow Ridge for quiet. After 2 years of hospitals and rehab and enough therapy copays to make your head spin. After insurance battles and accessible housing searches and 1,000 small battles just to exist. I wanted a place where my daughter could water sunflowers and draw on sidewalks, and hear birds without the rumble of elevators in the background. I wanted normal, whatever that word even means anymore. My daughter's name is Lena. She's 9 years old, born with cerebral palsy, which means her legs don't always listen, and her ears sometimes need a little extra help with certain sounds. But her spirit, God, I wish you could have met it before any of this happened. It walks into rooms and flips the lights on. It turns strangers into friends. It finds joy in things most people walk past without noticing. The way light hits a puddle, the pattern on a butterfly's wing, the specific yellow of those daffodils by our mailbox. The first week in Willow Ridge, I bought a tiny bird feeder from the hardware store downtown, the kind with the little perches and the clear plastic tube. Lena named every sparrow that visited. She'd sit by the window with her sketchpad, drawing them with exaggerated tail feathers and personalities she'd invented. We'd wave to joggers as they passed. We'd roll down to the community pond with her art supplies, and she'd spend hours drawing cattails and ducks, and once a goose that looked suspiciously like our HOA treasurer, and we laughed about it for days afterward. This inside joke just between us. If safe had a sound, it was her humming while she colored in the sky. That specific rising and falling melody she'd hum when everything in her body lined up right, when the pain was manageable and the world felt wide open and possible. Then Mara arrived on our doorstep with a rhubarb pie and a violation notice for our hedge height, both balanced in her hands like a magic trick, like she'd practiced the delivery in a mirror. I thought it was funny at first, this little bit of suburban theater, this performance of neighborly concern wrapped around bureaucratic power. But the notes multiplied like rabbits. The wheelchair ramp wasn't filed properly with the architectural committee. The blue fairy lights we'd strung along the porch railing were not. The chalk drawings were a graffiti precedent that could lower property values. Each notice typed on HOA letterhead. Each one signed with her looping signature. Each one CC'd to the entire board like she was building a case. She'd pass our driveway with her little poodle and a clipboard, her eyes moving over our property like a scanner, cataloging violations only she could see. The blinds in her living room would twitch whenever Lena rolled outside. I'd catch the movement from the corner of my eye, that flutter of fabric, that sense of being watched and measured and found wanting. Once she leaned close at the mailbox, all sugar and concern, and asked, in a voice dripping with false sympathy, whether families with special circumstances sometimes do better in communities designed for them. As if we were a piece of furniture that didn't match the set. As if Lena's wheelchair was a decorating choice I'd made without consulting the neighborhood. Aesthetic board. The thing about people like Mara, and I'm learning this the hard way, they don't swing first. They're too smart for that. They slowly tighten a net, thread by thread, rule by rule, until you're tangled and they can claim they were just following procedure. She took photos when Lena fed the birds, standing at the edge of our property line with her phone held high. She called the police one afternoon to report an unlicensed mobility device obstructing common walkways, and 2 young officers came to our door, embarrassed and apologizing with their eyes while they explained they had to check on a complaint. I kept my voice steady, showed them Lena's medical documentation, explained the ADA requirements they probably already knew. They left grateful to be done with it, and that night my kid asked me if the police were mad at her wheels. She drew herself the next day in therapy, a little figure in a chair, inside a gray box with eyes looking through the cracks. That drawing is the worst thing I've ever loved. I keep it in a folder I can't throw away and can't look at without breaking. I put up a small accessibility placard by our driveway after that. Nothing flashy, just a blue and white sign to let folks know this is a place where wheels live, where ramps are necessary, where accommodation isn't optional. It disappeared within a week. A neighbor whispered that he'd seen Mara near our property line at dusk with a screwdriver, but he wouldn't testify to it, wouldn't put his name on anything official. Too much neighborhood drama, he said, didn't want to get involved. At the next HOA meeting, held in the community center with its folding chairs and coffee urn and bulletin board covered in flyers for yoga classes and lost cats, Mara stood at the podium and said, "In this day and age, you can't be too careful. That's why I carry," and she patted her designer purse like a stage prop, like she was making a point about preparedness. You never know who's going to come rolling up. Some folks laughed. That polite suburban laugh that isn't really about humor so much as avoiding eye contact, about not making waves, about keeping the peace, even when the peace is rotten underneath. I didn't laugh. I went home and installed a little security camera facing the yard, the kind that connects to your phone and sends alerts when it detects motion. And I started keeping a notebook, dates and times, and phrases like "accidents happen," which she'd tossed over her shoulder once like it was a comment about the weather, casual and meaningless and full of threat. The morning of the shooting was one of those gentle ones, the kind that makes you think the world is finally on your side. The temperature was perfect, that sweet spot between cool and warm. The sky was blue and cloudless. Birds were doing their morning chorus. Lena had her pink hoodie on, her hair in that messy bun she was so proud of, and she told me the daffodils near the mailbox were smiling big today, so she wanted to draw them up close. I could hear her humming through the open window, that rising and falling sound she makes when everything in her body lines up. When the medication is working, and the pain is low, and she feels like herself. I was folding towels, thinking about coffee, thinking about maybe taking her to the pond later if she felt up to it, thinking about nothing important, thinking about everything that makes up a normal morning. And then that sound. You think you'll recognize a gunshot from movies, from TV, from the news reports you watch from a safe distance. But inside a neighborhood, at close range, it's weirder. Both smaller and bigger at once. Like the air itself gets punched, like reality hiccups and forgets how to work correctly. We rode with the I climbed into the ambulance and held Lena's hand while they worked, while they stuck needles in her arm and wrapped pressure bandages and spoke to each other in that calm, professional shorthand that means things are bad but not hopeless. The ambulance ceiling had those little soundproofing holes in it. that make you think of colanders and making spaghetti and anything. Anything at all except what's actually happening to your child. At the hospital. The lights were too white and the floors too shiny, and the second hand on the wall clock in the waiting room was a bully, ticking forward with no regard for how badly you want time to stop or reverse or give you a do-over. Nurses moved past with clipboards. Other families sat in plastic chairs with their own emergencies. A vending machine hummed in the corner. It missed her spine by millimeters. The surgeon said hours later, still in scrubs, still wearing that expression doctors get when they've seen something that could have gone either way. And I swear, I felt my knees try to give out right there in the consultation room. She was alive, breathing, hurt and drugged, and tiny against all those machines. But here, still here, while they worked on her, while she was in surgery and I couldn't do anything but wait. I sat in a chair with dried blood still on my palms. Blood I hadn't been able to wash off completely, and talked to a detective named Rowan. He was young, earnest, probably decent at his job, but he kept asking questions that felt wrong. Had there been previous altercations? Do you think your daughter might have startled her? Is it possible she didn't hear a warning? And I realized, in a slow and furious way that built like pressure behind my eyes, that there was already a story taking shape without us in it. A story where Mara was the frightened homeowner and Lena was the unpredictable element. Where a child in a wheelchair became a threat assessment instead of a victim. That night, Mara Kent made bail. She walked out of the police station in an ice cream-colored sweater, soft pink with little pearl buttons, her lawyer beside her in an expensive suit. She didn't look at the cameras. She didn't make a statement. She just got into a car and went home to her perfect house with its perfect lawn and its perfect hedge height. The HOA sent a community-wide email the next morning. Subject line, important safety notice. They called it a tragic safety incident between two residents. They used the word incident 4 times in 3 paragraphs. They used Lena's name exactly 0 times. They reminded everyone about upcoming pool maintenance and the summer block party planning committee. I forwarded that email to every board member with a photo attachment from our security camera. Mara standing in our driveway with the pistol still in her hand, her face clearly visible. The timestamp showing it was taken seconds after the shot. And I typed just one line. Tell me again about safety. No one replied. Not a single person. Grief does this thing where it leans over into clarity. All the soft edges burn away and you see things with a kind of terrible sharpness. I printed every note Mara had ever left on our door. Every violation notice, every complaint, every passive-aggressive reminder about community standards. I printed every photo she'd taken of Lena, every timestamp from our security footage showing her watching our house. I scanned the hospital report, the police report, the witness statements. I took everything to a local reporter named Jay Chen, who writes about disability rights and housing discrimination for the regional paper. I sat across from her in a coffee shop that smelled like espresso and cinnamon, and I told the story like a rope I was pulling hand over hand out of a well. Slowly, carefully, not leaving anything out. She didn't look away. She didn't check her phone. She took notes in a spiral notebook with a pen that had teeth marks on the cap. And when I was done, she said, I'm going to make sure people hear this. The article went live 48 hours later. Disabled child, shot in HOA dispute, allegations of cover-up, raise alarm. There was a photo of Lena smiling with her chalk tin. There was the still from our security camera. There were pieces of the police report that didn't line up with Mara's initial statement. There were quotes from neighbors who'd witnessed the harassment, who'd stayed silent until someone asked the right questions. The piece exploded. Shares cascaded across social media. Comments sections filled with outrage and prayers. Strangers started sending casseroles and offers to help. One guy promised to mow our lawn for life. Disability rights organizations picked up the story. Local TV news came knocking. And then, like clockwork, came the Mara hired a public relations firm, one of those crisis management companies that specialize in reputation repair. They released a glossy statement that said she'd been harassed for months, that she feared for her safety, that Lena had ignored verbal requests to move away from her property line, that her dog had been menaced by the wheelchair. None of it was true, but it was professionally packaged and delivered with just enough detail to sound plausible. Local TV put her on with a sympathetic anchor. All soft lighting and concerned questions. Mara cried, real tears, the kind that don't mess up mascara. She said, I have kids too. I would never hurt a child. I was terrified. And there it was, the magic costume that makes anything forgivable in America. Fear. People forgive fear, especially when it wears pearls and speaks in calm, measured tones about property values and safety concerns. A rock came through our living room window the next night, scattering glass across the floor where Lena would have been sitting if she'd been home. The word liar showed up in orange spray paint on our fence 2 days later. Big letters visible from the street. A cop came, took a report, shrugged, and said, tensions are high right now. Maybe lay low for a while. That's when I called Alicia Crow, civil rights attorney, 40-something years old, gray streak in her black hair that she wears like a badge. office downtown, above a faux restaurant. She charged me exactly nothing for the first consultation because, she said, some cases you take because you're a lawyer. Some you take because you're a person. This one's both re-sued, Mara Kent and the Willow Ridge Homeowners Association. Not for money though, we asked for that too, but for accountability. Alicia filed for records, for phone logs, for board emails, for security footage from other houses, for everything that might show the pattern of harassment that led to a 9-year-old girl bleeding on a sidewalk. I didn't sleep much during those weeks. Lena was in the pediatric ICU with monitors beeping and nurses checking vitals every hour. A stuffed otter tucked under one arm that a stranger had sent in the mail. When I told her about the vigil, hundreds of people lining the street with candles. Senator Alvarez hugging her picture to his chest at the microphone and promising a review of how neighborhoods handle accessibility and bias. She blinked slow and said, "People came for me." I stood at the edge of that candlelight, watching strangers murmur Lena's name like a prayer, like an incantation against cruelty. And I thought about how injustice can paradoxically create community. How sometimes it takes blood to make people see what was always there. The turn came on a Tuesday at 11:17 p.m. My phone buzzed with a text from a woman I only knew by her garden. Third house down, the one with the purple tulips that bloom early. Quiet neighbor, kept to herself, always smiled but never stopped to chat. "I think you want to hear this," she wrote. "I can't stay silent anymore." Her name is Jenna Park. She'd recorded a phone call with Mara a month before the shooting. A conversation about ongoing neighborhood issues that had started as gossip and turned into something darker. The audio is grainy, but the tone isn't ambiguous. You hear a drawer slide open, a sigh, and then Mara's voice, low and oddly cheerful, like she's sharing a recipe. "If I see that damn wheelchair on my sidewalk again, I'll handle it myself. I don't care if she's 5 or 50. People only learn when they feel the heat." There's a little laugh at the end, the kind that tastes metallic. We brought the file to Alicia in the morning. She listened to it 3 times, her expression never changing, and then she smiled without showing her teeth. "Mens re," she said. "Intent. This changes everything." Subpoenas went out like confetti. The emails came back first, pulled from the HOA server despite attempts to delete them. Mara, writing to a friend in a neighboring association. "Circus on my block. Neon wheelchair, cluttering the street. I've reported them 5 times. If the cops won't keep Willow Ridge safe, I will." A fire emoji at the end, because even violent threats get accessorized now. Then a neighbor who'd kept to himself, who'd never joined the HOA drama, walked into Alicia's office with footage from his porch camera. Mara, pacing her driveway late at night, 3 days before the shooting, with her holster visible, finger tapping the grip like a metronome, muttering to herself. The audio is faint but audible when enhanced. One wrong move, just one. And then the surprise that broke everything open. Tracy Nolan, former HOA treasurer who'd resigned quietly 6 months earlier, took the stand at the preliminary hearing and said, under oath, that after the shooting, when the board had gathered in an emergency session, Mara hadn't asked if Lena would survive. She'd asked if the security footage had been deleted. The courthouse felt like a school assembly nobody wanted to attend. Wood panels old and shiny from decades of similar proceedings. Air that smelled like paper and burnt coffee, and the anxiety of people waiting for justice. I sat with my palms pressed flat to my knees while Alicia laid out the timeline like cards in a winning hand. The notices, the photos, the police call about a hazardous mobility device, the missing accessibility sign, the gun carried openly, mentioned repeatedly, the statements about people rolling up the recorded audio, the emails promising to handle it, the video of her pacing, the testimony about deleted footage, the warning no one heeded, the bullet, the 9-year-old girl, the sentence every parent in that courtroom couldn't get past. I didn't even see her. The defense tried to weave a story about anxiety and community pressure and how fear distorts judgment, how a woman alone feels vulnerable, how she'd been conditioned to see threats everywhere. They brought in an expert on HOA stress. They painted Mara as a victim of her own overdeveloped sense of duty. Alicia held up the last thing she'd saved, a color photocopy of Lena's chalk drawing from that morning, the one that hadn't been finished. Orange petals reaching toward a yellow sun. "Fear of what?" she asked softly, turning to face the jury. "Flowers. A child drawing on public sidewalk with washable chalk. Which part of this required deadly force?" The jury went out at 2:30 on a Thursday afternoon. They were back in less than 2 hours, which everyone said was a good sign or a terrible one, depending on who you asked. Guilty on assault with a deadly weapon. Guilty on reckless endangerment of a minor. Guilty on attempted murder with hate crime enhancement due to disability bias. The judge, an older woman with reading glasses on a chain, read the sentence in a voice that carried no emotion but somehow felt like vindication anyway. 15 years, no early release, mandatory anger management, and bias training. Though everyone knew it was too late for that to matter, Mara stared straight ahead the whole time, like she was waiting for an apology from the room, like this was all a misunderstanding that would get cleared up. If everyone would just listen to her side of the story one more time, A sound left me that I didn't recognize. Not relief exactly. Not joy. More like gravity returning after a long, wrong float through space where nothing had weight or meaning. I looked at Lena beside me, her hand tucked in mine, a little scar peeking above the collar of her dress where the surgeons had gone in. And I said in a voice only she could hear, "They saw you. Everyone saw you." What comes after a verdict is messier than the gavel suggests. The HOA board resigned. All but 2 members who'd been on record opposing Mara's escalation. The neighborhood hired a mediator and started over with bylaws that mention human beings, not just hedge heights and paint colors. Accessibility requirements baked into every section. A permanent seat for residents with disabilities on the board. Training that's more than a PowerPoint presentation. Actual consequences for harassment that go beyond a warning letter. Senator Alvarez pushed a bill for oversight of HOA discrimination practices. The local paper ran a series on weaponized civility, which is a fancy way of saying the knives some folks hide in manners and procedures and rules that sound reasonable until you realize they're only enforced against certain people. And Lena, brave as ever, came home. Healing is not cinematic. It's not a montage set to inspiring music. It's slow and non-linear and full of setbacks. It's her flinching when a truck backfires, then flinching a little less the next week. It's her asking if the birds at the pond missed her, then actually going to check and finding out they did, that they came right to her chair like she'd never been gone. It's her rolling out to the sidewalk one afternoon in April, me 2 steps behind trying not to hover, and choosing the orange chalk again because she said the daffodils didn't get to finish last time, and they deserved better than that. She wrote a letter for her school counselor that we ended up sharing at the new HOA meeting. The reformed one with the new bio. Dear people who were scared of me. It started in her careful, slanted handwriting. I am small, and I like flowers. My wheels are loud sometimes, but they do not hurt anyone. I want to be outside because the sun feels like a hug. Please see me. Love, Lena. I watched our neighbors read it with their heads bowed, some of them crying, all of them quiet. And I thought, this is what accountability looks like in real life. Not just a sentence handed down from a judge, but a change in how we see each other, how we carry each other, how we decide what matters more, the rules or the people. The rules are supposed to serve. Sometimes I still think about that line. I didn't see her. It's become a kind of curse for me, and a dare. How many times do we choose not to see because seeing would require us to do something? How many times do we let someone like Mara, someone in a cardigan with a clipboard, translate their fear into law and call it safety? How many times do we stay quiet because getting involved is uncomfortable? Because making waves threatens the peace we've convinced ourselves exists. Willow Ridge looked perfect from the outside. Trimmed lawns, newsletter photos of lemonade stands, and 4th of July bike parades. Matching mailboxes installed according to approved specifications. And underneath all that, an economy of silence. People will believe anything if it costs them nothing. Until suddenly, it costs a kid's blood on a sidewalk. And then, everyone is awake and wondering how it got this far. There's a bench by the pond. Now with Lena's name on a little brass plate. Donated by someone we'll never meet. She draws there with the other kids on weekends. The HOA sets out boxes of chalk at block parties now, all colors. And nobody complains about the sidewalk art anymore. The first line of the new community handbook, the one everyone had to sign, is 3 words that make me tear up every time I see them. People over rules. Not because rules don't matter. They do. Structure matters. Standards matter. But they're not supposed to be weapons. They're supposed to be tools for building something better than what we'd have without them. Mara will serve her time in a facility 3 hours north of here. The neighborhood will move on because that's what neighborhoods do. Some version of this story will happen somewhere else. In some other manicured community where the lawns are perfect and the hearts are small. Unless we keep our eyes open. Unless we decide that seeing is a choice we make every single day. That's the whole lesson. Really, see each other, early, loudly, before it takes blood and headlines and a judge's gavel to make it matter. So here's where I leave it with you, the person on the other side of this screen. If you've ever lived under an HOA, or next door to someone like Mara, or if you've been the one who felt invisible because your life doesn't fit the template, tell me what safety means where you live. Do communities have the right to draw hard lines around aesthetics when those lines cut through a child's ability to exist? When does "I was afraid" stop being a reason and start being an excuse? If you think the verdict was too harsh, say why. If you think it wasn't enough, say that too. We built this channel to surface the stories polite neighborhoods bury, not because we like outrage, but because sunlight is a disinfectant and conversation is a tool. Drop your take in the comments. Right and wrong, accountability and mercy. What community means when it's actually tested. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, someone who's fighting their own battle with an HOA or dealing with discrimination wrapped in procedure, share it. Subscribe if you want more of these long, messy human stories we put out here, because silence protects the Maras of the world. And saying it out loud protects the rest of us. And for Lena, for every kid who draws flowers on concrete and calls the sun a hug, For everyone who's been told they don't belong in a place that should be home, we see you. We see you now.